sprinkle a little bit of that in there as well. But before I do, let me introduce myself and my teammate here, Jim D'Amato. So Jim, or James, and myself, we work with zones 25B, 26, 27, and then 2 districts in zones 31. So altogether, we cover 39 different districts across the West Coast and, of course, Hawaii. And yeah, we help them with all sorts of different issues, and it's really a great pleasure to get to know everyone in such a different area across the country. So what we do, we kind of break it up into 4 different things. We have policy, resources, operations, and then online help. So let me go through a little bit about each of these things. I'm going to kind of fly through these slides because I know we don't have a lot of time here. And then hopefully I can get to everything. So with policy and procedure, we really are the experts on all constitutional documents. So this is something that can be found in the Rotary International Constitution, the bylaws, the standard Rotary Club Constitution, the recommended Rotary Club bylaws, or the code of policies. Altogether, I mean, it's hundreds of pages of documents that we're not expecting you all as district officers to read and know by heart. Obviously, it's a good idea to be familiar with them, but we're kind of your liaison, your help, your experts that you can go to if you have any question with that. And I mean, that could be something as simple as like naming convention for a club, all the way to dealing with an adult harassment and what to do and what's the policy on that. So really, it's a lot of different variation in between that. We also deal with minor issues with branding, which is the brands or the marks is part of the policy and how it's worked on. So, you know, we like to help clubs and districts stay on brand and, you know, always identify their district and/or club. For resources, we like to, you know, we help people connect people with the resources that they need. This can be something as simple as publications and electronic materials, online tools, including the Learning Center, and of course, connecting you with Rotary staff. I mean, when in doubt, if we can't answer your question, we can at least put you in contact with the right team. We do deal with a lot of issues and kind of we wear many different hats. We don't deal with grants and the foundation as much. And so if a question comes in, we can always pass you along to those people. And of course, the support center, you can always reach them as well. So that's another team that can always help answer those foundation and grants questions. For club operations, we're the liaison and helping clubs with a lot of the executive decisions, a lot of the things that they start. So like chartering a new club, having a new satellite club, club name changes, club mergers, IRS letters of determination, getting on our 501c4 group exemption. All of those issues, we kind of help with that process. We walk people through to make sure that they're doing it correctly and answer any questions that they might have. Online tools, we're not IT experts in CDS, but we are the team that kind of helps with the user experience. And so we know like my Rotary has had a recent update that has been kind of fun for a lot of people, and there's been a lot of issues with that. And so we're kind of the team that can help you get through some of those issues and connecting you with some of the tools that we have online. There's a lot of great tools on the website that can help your club and district kind of have a successful performance, such as Rotary Club Central for all the clubs, keeping track of goals, keeping them on, you know, on target and everything with that. Also, the Learning Center, as I'm sure you guys are all aware, there's a plethora of different courses and online tools that you can find on the Learning Center that can help you not only teach, but also to learn yourself. And of course, the Brand Center is a great tool to have to directly create logos that you can then put on your service projects or whatever you're trying to do to promote the Rotary brand in your area.
Hey, Nick, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, could you go back to the Learning Center slide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Just for everyone's information, the Learning Center was actually upgraded effective at yesterday morning, where they've categorized all the Learning Center things in a better way to make them easier to understand and easier to follow and easier to find things. So just so everyone's aware of that, that's something that kicked off yesterday.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. And I'm sorry if you hear a crying baby in my background. My 1-year-old just woke up from his nap. So perfect. Okay, so the DG funding. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the fiduciary responsibilities as a district, because as of this year, every single district in the entire world is going to be under the new district funding or district governor funding model. So it was a test, and now it's the entire, it's just the way it is now. And so before, district governors would receive 70% of their allocation at the beginning of their year, and then they would expense reports to us at Rotary International. And once the expenses reached 100% of their funding, we would then send the last remaining 30%. Now, what we do now is we send 100% of the funding upfront to the districts. And so this is really for the districts to handle. So then now the district governor doesn't send us expense reports. They send it straight to the district, and we've kind of put that responsibility on the district finance committee. I know some districts have district treasurers, whatever you want to call it. There's usually a finance committee that kind of deals with this. And so instead of expensing reports or expensing things to us at Rotary International, it all just kind of stays in-house. So I've created kind of a little timeline to be transparent and to show you exactly what goes into this allocation that Rotary International gives to the district governor for the purposes of their job. So starting in DGN year, so the district governor nominee year, district governor nominees can begin tracking their expenses. They might not get reimbursed for them right away, but it's a good idea to start tracking them so that whenever you do become district governor, you already have everything organized. In September of the DGE year, we will reach out to the DGE, so what we did with Sandy just recently this past September, and we'll ask for a survey. And so the whole idea is we look to come up with the allocation, we look at various variables, and one of the big ones is how much you're traveling. So depending on where you live, which island you live on, how many flights you need to take. I mean, I know it's complicated because you have multiple islands and everyone has to take various flights or whatever means of transportation to get to all the clubs. We look at that, and then we come up with the DGE funding amount that goes to the board. And so in October, this goes to the RI Board of Directors. In February of the DGE year, it is approved, and then we notified districts. So we just notified Sandy, I think, this past week, and hopefully the district finance chair was also copied on that. Starting in the DG year, district will receive 100% of that funding that was notified to them. And then during their year, all expenses from the DGN, DGE, and then DG year going forward can be expensed through the district. 1 month after the DG year ends, this is the responsibility that we now want. Instead of getting multiple expense reports throughout the year, there's 1-page report that we want at the end of the year. So this page, this one-pager essentially just is showing us that all the money was spent and how broadly it was spent. Not details, we don't need receipts. We don't need anything specific, just like the broad details that Sandy and the district finance chair now have that report, so they can look at that and kind of get an idea for what's expected. And then if there is money left over, for example, COVID happens, you're not traveling as much, maybe you didn't get the opportunity to spend it all, that's whenever we coordinate sending that leftover money back. Then you have 1 year to complete the district or the annual statement on finances by our district finances. And that's a little bit more complicated. That has to have a third-party audit and then approved by all the clubs, which I'm sure you're aware of that process. And then we have a team that will reach out and coordinate with that as they get closer to that. So Naomi's going to be coming up on that process in the next Rotary year. Because districts now own the funding, so to speak, it's really up to the district what's eligible and what isn't eligible. In years past, traditionally, we kind of always had a list and we said, listen, it has to be this, it has, it can't be that. So we deemed what was eligible and not. But because all the funding goes to the district, it's really up to the district on what they deem eligible or not. We can provide examples, such as you can see on the screen here, things that we've traditionally done. This is a guide. It's not written in stone. It's really up to the finance committee. we have ineligible things that we've always deemed ineligible. So like paying for a spouse's meal or going to the international convention, those types of things we haven't. But like I said, it's up to the district. And so I can't repeat that enough because we get that question quite often. So the main responsibilities from you as district officers with the DG funding allocation are keeping track of the expenses during the DG year, and then of course any from the DGE, DGN year, and deeming what is eligible and then completing those 2 reports. So I think I had until 9:15 your time, and we're just about there. I do want to add a shameless plug for a podcast that we started at work or at Rotary International in our CDS team. So it's called All Things Rotary, a CDS podcast, where I actually host it, and we bring Rotarians all around the world to kind of talk about different things that they can, listeners can apply into their Rotary lives. So the first episode, we talked about how to start a new club. We talk about how to make it diverse, equitable, inclusive, how we do it during a pandemic nonetheless. And then we also talked about membership engagement, those types of things. So all the things that really have to do with club and district support, we're trying to work in some episodes, but with real life applications. So you can find that on anywhere where podcasts are found, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Just All Things Rotary, a CDS America's podcast. And feel free to share that with anyone you want. And thank you. Yeah, thanks for the time here. I think I don't know if it was now or later, but we'll stick around if you guys have questions, or you can write them in the chat and we can respond there as well.
Thank you. So Nick, I did send that link out to the district in my newsletter. So hopefully you'll get some more subscribers to the podcast.
And was it your district, Naomi, that you guys also have a podcast?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got a few emails back when I sent that out. So thanks. I appreciate it.
We can, because Zoom does have the audio that we can put into a podcast. But anyway, we want to have just a few minutes for any questions that you may have. Anybody has for Nick or Jim?
I did have a question, Governor Naomi. This is Doug. Because I'm a policy nerd, I was very excited to see the code of policies as a part of the information that Wendy made available to us. And as I was rolling through there and looking at the club information in the code of policies, I didn't notice anything in there that when it identified the requirements for club, it talked about the locality, but I didn't notice anything in there about e-clubs being permitted. Yet I thought that in fact had occurred. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, really great question. So it is a little bit complicated with the locality and e-clubs, right? Because e-clubs theoretically could be anywhere in the world. And so the locality in the code of policies is really just like referring to kind of a regional identifier, or more so even a district identifier. So like if District 5000, I believe you guys have an e-club as well. As long as that district's in there, that's the locality that we're looking for, because a club has to, according to policy, the club has to belong to a district. So it can't just be out in the Rotary sphere by itself. But with that being said, e-clubs can have members from all over the world. Members don't have to be specific to the district. And I don't know if Jim, you wanted to add anything to that as well.
Actually, no. The omission is, I think, due to the fact it's considered now just a regular everyday Rotary club like any other Rotary club. So there used to be a reference in the standard Rotary Club Constitution to a e-club locality, which could be like a specific district or worldwide. And because e-clubs are now considered just a type of any other club, they limited that from the standard Rotary Club Constitution. So it's not included, but like it doesn't really include cause-based clubs in a way, except dealing with club names. So that could be looked at that the same type of thing.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Nick or Jim?
Couple questions coming in the chat. I will definitely make my slides available. I'll send them over to Naomi and then she can pass it along to the group. So good questions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So now we have our legal counsel, Del Green. So Del's going to be talking about the responsibility as a district leader and some of his insight as a PDG. Del, take it away. Okay, Del, you're muted. Del.
I think that was intentional because I didn't want to hear myself talk. By the way, let me know if you hear a bunch of pounding in the background. I'm at my office and Rich Proctor knows this. We're in the middle of a renovation in different parts of the office. So if you see somebody hammering, or that's what you see, then I'm probably in a bad spot. But if you hear and it becomes annoying, let me know. I don't know that I could do anything about it, but
Yeah.
feel free to let me know.
Yeah, I think
So-
it's okay as long as they're not hammering you, right? So
Yeah, well, you know, that's kind of how I feel about it as well. So we're going to deal with legal issues, but I think what I've been asked to do is to deal with them in the context of fiduciary responsibility. So with that, hold on. How many of you ever had any experience with fiduciary responsibility? Anyone? Show of hands. Oh, there's Dave. Oh, a few of us. Good, good. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to you guys right now, and you guys can take it over from here. All right, so fiduciary responsibility. I can figure out how to make this thing work again. I'm trying to see if I can see a show of hands. Maybe this isn't going to quite work this way. So for those of us, let me just open it up. Anybody, what is a fiduciary? Someone in the class?
I would guess that it's to be legally or financially responsible for another entity.
To be legally or financially responsible. Okay, good. I think you've got a lot of the different elements in there. So this is our outline for today. We'll cover over what is a fiduciary, what are the fiduciary duties. We'll cover some of the basic duties. I'd like to not leave it all doom and gloom and talk about some decision maker protections and then some hypotheticals. So as we go through this, what I'd like to invite all of you to be doing is to be thinking about things, situations, incidents that you either have experienced in Rotary or heard of in the context of Rotary. Because at the end, I'm going to invite you to throw out a hypothetical, and they don't necessarily have to be real, completely real situations. Maybe it's a concern that you might have or something. I would ask that if it is a real situation, feel free to disguise the name of the club or the person, because the whole purpose of this is not to necessarily out anybody. So the word fiduciary, where does it come from? Well, it's a very old word, and as you can see, the derivation is the word trust, confidence, and reliance. And you will see this concept time and time again in the concept of what is a fiduciary, because these are the things that give rise to the need for the duty and also the responsibilities that go with it in the event that you were to breach that duty. So it can be either a noun or an adjective. As a noun, referring to a person, place, or thing. Here, the fiduciary would be a person who has the duty, and I think this is where Sean was, the duty created by that person's undertaking to act for somebody else's benefit. But it can also be an adjective. So you're describing. It's describing the kind of relationship. Again, we talk about trust, confidence, and reliance. That's a relationship that's founded on these things: trust, confidence, and reliance, and what have you. So it's a very important duty. According to the Hawaii Supreme Court, a fiduciary relation is said to exist and relief is granted in all cases in which influence has been acquired and abused, in which confidence has been reposed and betrayed. And so when it says relief is granted, what does that mean? Anyone? Someone?
You can be sued.
Exactly. Who was that? Because that's exactly right.
That was me.
Oh, Dave Hamill, thank you very much for volunteering, because that's exactly right. You know, we're attorneys, and so we don't like to just come out and say we're going to sue you. We're going to grant relief. Doesn't it sound so much better until you get sued? Okay. 3 basic types of duties. We have a duty of care. This is your duty to act in good faith and with reasoned competence. The duty of care. We also have a duty of loyalty, you know, to act for the benefit of the organization, whoever your fiduciary is, to avoid conflicts of interest. This is your duty of loyalty. And Doug Adams' favorite, probably, because he's a policy nerd, he said, is a duty of obedience, or excuse me, of obedience. You know, the duty to follow your policies, your bylaws, your articles of organization, your charter, your mission statement, to make sure that if you're a club that has a fundraiser, that you are paying your general excise tax and what have you, a duty of obedience. So let's look at the duty of care just a little bit closer. So it's a duty to act in good faith with the ordinary care and in a manner the person reasonably believes to be in the best interest of the organization. This is going to be a recurring theme. If you remember anything about today, kind of just keep this in mind, you know, that sort of that reasonable person standard. You know, the duty of care requires that you be reasonably informed. So it doesn't mean that you show up at board meetings and just take up space and make no effort to read committee reports, read financial reports, read whatever reports are given to you in advance of the meeting. You want to be somewhat prepared for these meetings as they occur. But it doesn't mean that you're an insurer. You know, just because you're on a board or acting in a fiduciary relationship to somebody, it doesn't mean that you're an absolute insurer. I mean, you have, it's possible that reasonable minds could differ on things. And as long as you're acting in good faith, you will have a defense. So it doesn't necessarily mean burying your head in the sand, does it? Be prepared. So how do we fulfill our the duty of care? Well, act at all times in good faith and with the appropriate diligence, care, and skill required under the circumstances. We act in a manner that we believe to be in the best interest of the organization, not selfishly. And then we attend our meetings and we do participate. Just having it on our resume does not make you a good fiduciary. And you have the ability to rely on experts. Can you rely blindly on experts, do you think? No, you can't. I mean, if you have reason to believe that your expert's out to lunch, or there's something that might be wrong with your expert's report, you have a duty to take that into consideration. I mean, you just can't simply just blindly accept the information. You have to act reasonable. And then loyalty. This is one of my favorites, the duty of loyalty, to not act with a conflict of interest. The duty of loyalty stands for the principle that persons who make decisions in their capacities as fiduciaries must act without personal economic conflict. The duty of loyalty can be breached either by making a self-interested transaction or taking a corporate opportunity. So if you can't act in a conflict of interest situation, what if Lane Kohama makes these really awesome widgets and I want to use these widgets as a fundraiser in my Rotary Club and Lane is in my club? Does that mean that because Lane is in my club, I can't buy his widgets at arm's length in an arm's length transaction and turn that into an awesome fundraiser? Thoughts? Kind of a no-brainer. You can do that. Of course you can do that. Would Lane have the ability to, say, for example, was a decision maker, could he vote on that? Well, the answer is yes, he could vote on it. He can vote on it. Is it prudent for him to vote on it? No, it's absolutely not prudent for him to vote on it. So although he has the ability to do that because he's a member of the board and has that right to do that, if he's disclosed, by the way, he's disclosed the conflict of interest. We all know that it's Lane's widgets. He would be able to participate, but I think it would be foolish for him to do that because, you know, you don't want to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And if these widgets are as good as we all believe it is, we'll approve the transaction in any event. So things to keep in mind with the duty of loyalty. So other ways to fulfill the duty, well, by pursuing the interests of the organization and its purpose rather than our own, disclosing conflicts of interest, which I can't spell obviously, and recusing ourselves from voting on matters where there is a conflict, and maintaining the confidentiality of the entity. You know, our duty of loyalty, the second duty. I kind of like this cartoon. Conflict of interest? What conflict of interest? For those vegans out there. And then the last one we have, this is, I'm going to call it the Doug Adams duty, the duty of obedience, because he is the policy nerd. So policy nerds love the fact that we have policies, and these are the people we can usually rely upon to make sure that we adhere to them. You know, the duty of obedience means that fiduciaries must make sure that the organization is abiding by all applicable laws, regs, policies, and that we don't engage in illegal or unauthorized activities. So to do this, we ensure that the organization, these are the things that you would do as a fiduciary for your organization, if you're in that relationship, you know, ensuring that your organization is acting at all times in accordance with its mission and purposes. It's acting legally and ethically and doing all the things it's supposed to do. So what happens if somebody gets sued? Well, they have to prove four things. One, a duty. So we talked about the different duties. And so you can either have a breach of the duty of, a duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. They would have to show that there was a breach of that duty, that there was a causal connection between that breach and the duty, and damages. You need to have damages according to the Hawaii Appellate Court. Now, we talked about what would a reasonable person do under like circumstances. And this harkens back to what's called the business judgment rule. And this is something that I think that we're well advised to kind of keep in mind. We're not insurers when we're acting on our, for whatever organization we're acting for. But we do open ourselves up for the possibility of liability if we don't act in the way that a reasonably prudent person would act. This is from one of the local cases, a Hawaii Supreme Court case. A person meets the business judgment test when making a business decision in good faith and honest belief that the action was in the best interest of the organization. This is a takeaway. This is your get out of jail free, more or less, card. More or less, because, you know, as an attorney, I can't guarantee anything. And just remember, you know, WWRPPD, you know, what would a reasonable and prudent person do? So is this guy prudent? I don't know, it might be, depending on the circumstances.
Yeah, when it comes
here we
to
go.
daddies.
There you go, Sean. And what about the four-way test? I mean, this is an amazing tool that we have available to us. Can you think of what duty of do you think the first element of the test touches upon? Someone? What duty? Can you name a duty? Sean, I'm going to pick on you then. What duty?
I would say transparency.
Okay, and why do you say that? Yep.
Because I think that you're being straightforward and upfront with everyone that you have that you're operating in good faith and above board.
I like that. So we're talking about the duty of loyalty, being, you know, if I've got a conflict, I'm disclosing that conflict, I'm being transparent. Very good, very good. What about being fair to all concerned? Someone?
Duty of care.
Duty of, oh, I like that. Yes, I absolutely, because it uses the word good faith, right? The duty of care involves the usage of good faith. Absolutely. Who is that? Mariko. Good job. Now we know we have a couple others. Let's see. Let's just jump quickly to the end. Is it beneficial to all concerned? What duty do you think this would touch upon? Anyone? Maybe the duty of obedience. You know, is it beneficial to all concerned? You know, making sure we disclose conflicts and what have you. But you know, as Rotarians and you as leaders have probably a leg up on the average fiduciary because you have been exposed to the four-way test. As I look around the room, I know that all of you do live your lives pursuant to the four-way test, and so this test is a good bellwether that'll help us to avoid problems down the road. Now, some of the things that we can do in addition to the business judgment rule, if you are, for example, a fiduciary because you are involved on a board as an officer or director of a nonprofit corporation, we have a Hawaii Nonprofit Corporations Act. In that particular act, you have the right to, in certain circumstances, have immunity from your actions if they're done pursuant to your good faith belief that your actions are in the best interest of the entity. There's also a right to indemnification. There's also a right to have the corporation obtain insurance. And this is something that Rich Proctor is going to talk to us further about. By the way, Rich Proctor is my go-to guy when it comes to insurance. So I'm really happy that he's here today. And the last thing I have here is just information, making sure that you are well-informed, because if you're a well-informed board member, or what have you, club member, club officer, then you're going to be in a good position to avoid problems. And when problems arise, heaven forbid, you're going to be in a good position to be able to deal with them. So really, I think I'm kind of running out of time. Does anybody have any hypos that they wanted to kind of just toss out?
Yeah, sure, Dell. I would, if that's okay.
Sure.
Particularly the duty of loyalty, I think, in our case, right? Many of us may be connected with a variety of nonprofits in addition to whatever businesses that we're in.
Yeah.
And if we're in a decision-making position, either as a governor or a club president, or even on the board where you have to vote on things, it can be tricky to identify and walk through the process of what is a conflict and what's not a conflict. And so those are the hypothetical that you talked about in terms of somebody in the club having a business thing, and then can you use that? I would just say that the watchword, just like in real estate, it's location, location, location. In the duty of loyalty, it's disclose, disclose, disclose.
You're absolutely correct. Disclose, and if you're not quite sure, disclose that too, because you're going to reduce the likelihood of getting hurt if you are transparent. Right? I heard someone say transparent too, and that's exactly right.
Yeah.
You know, some of the things you got to keep in mind. You know, our clubs, for example, have fundraisers. You know, part of adhering to our duties is to make sure that you know, when we go out and fundraise, you know, to look at everything, all the different aspects about that fundraiser. For example, if I have a flyer that says that that I'm fundraising to support, you know, the educational programs of the middle school of East Kaho'olawe, and I decide to use it for club operations, is that a good idea? Probably not. You know, I mean, if somebody wants to make a donation, but it's the donor specifies that, you know, they want this to go to dictionaries for the club of West Kaho'olawe or something, and then we decide to use it for something else. You know, are these the things? Maybe these are red flags when these things come up. What about when we have our election of officers in our because we have a duty of obedience in our bylaws, most clubs, if they have bylaws based on the standard bylaws, you know, there are all these deadlines by which we are supposed to have elected our officers for the coming year. Does that always happen in every club? I'll tell you, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But then how do you deal with that kind of situation? And, you know, in that kind of situation, you know, my practical response, this is not so much a legal one. I mean, if everybody is, the time you start busting out the bylaws and your declarations and what have you is really when there's a problem. If you can work amicably and everybody feels that, you know, if things are working generally, you know, I'm not so much miffed about, you know, whether or not we've actually followed the exact letter of the law. Now, as soon as somebody pulls it out and starts looking at it, well, we're going to quickly revert to that because that's really where it ends. But, you know, you can modify things. For example, you know, what if you have your club treasurer has been indicted for embezzling funds from another organization? What should you do in your club? Do you kick the person out? Do you allow them to still be the treasurer? Does it matter that they've only been indicted and not convicted? Questions. You know,
I have a thing that happened in a club that when I was in San Diego, where the husband of the club president had promised to some nonprofits monies on behalf of the club. And we had to, it pretty much opened us up as a board to, you know, exposure. And so we had to really look at our bylaws, look at what we needed to do. And it was definitely a very uncomfortable time. Needless to say, actually, our club president ended up divorcing her husband, but that's a whole other aspect of it. But yeah, it was, he had guaranteed a significant amount of money. That club actually had several $1 million in foundation. So.
Yeah, I probably would start off by looking at my bylaws, see what the responsibility is. And then, you know, even if I'm not responsible, some of the things we sometimes do as fiduciaries is we decide, you know, what in the best interest of the organization, because it has a reputation and what have you, even though the spouse didn't have authority to, because it's the spouse and it's not a Rotarian. I don't know what your exact facts are.
He was a member of the club. He was a member.
He was?
Yeah.
And did he have the authority to make that promise?
No.
Yeah, so that's okay. So whether he was or wasn't in the club, you know, the fact that he didn't have the authority, you know, but it does put the rest of the club, a good club, in a difficult spot. And so, you know, as a good club, you're looking at, you know, first of all, do you want to, my approach would be to get the facts, always get the facts, and not always from the first person who's going to talk to you, because that's a person who might have some angle, something they're trying to get across to you. So I'm always leery and wary when I'm gathering information, because I want people to be honest to me, and I want the information, good, bad, or ugly. And then with that information, start making decisions. Some of them are based on what's legal, and some are based on what's politic and what's good for the organization, just from a public relations standpoint.
Del,
yes?
In the various 501c3 organizations that I belong to, when we receive donations or I give a donation, we're pretty careful about marking them as restricted, temporarily restricted, or, you know, for the general usage. And that's fine. And people obviously are looking for a receipt for their taxes and so forth. And they're looking for those funds to be expended for the purpose they designate. I think the squishy area is within clubs and fundraisers, as you've mentioned, because those are not 501c3s, and we may not, we receive the money. It may be intended for a specific purpose, scholarships or whatever it might be, but the board needs a lot of discretion not to siphon that money off for something else when the need arises without approval of those who donated.
Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Thanks, Dick. Thank you.
Yeah. I also want to make another comment, Del. We just started actually earlier this month our first launch out to do board training, and it went over pretty well, and we had almost 80 people on the call. So I think what you just laid out right there, I agree with what Doug put in the chat, is that this is really clear. It's really simple, and I think part of what Doug was saying about disclose. I think the key element to that is just people being informed there and the lack of awareness. I mean, we have 200 plus people in our district that sit on boards, and I'll bet you just a small fraction of them understand fiduciary responsibility as you laid it out there. So I would really like it if you would take this presentation and we could roll it into either spring training or a separate type of board training that we can do every year for every board member. Because like in our club, Doug and I are in the same club. I mean, we've had situations in the past where we had fundraisers that went to people's organizations for which they sit on the board. And so, obviously that's a conflict of interest, but unless people are told, that information is laid out really clearly at the beginning. Okay, before we vote on who's going to get this $10,000 award, if you have a conflict of interest, you need to, disqualify yourself from the vote. And that hasn't happened simply because I don't know if people just aren't aware or, don't disclose that. But your presentation was really great. I hope we can do that again. Thank you.
I'm at Naomi's disposal, and probably
good.
yours too then.
Oh, good,
If I could
good.
just briefly follow up on Benson's comments, if it's okay. I think oftentimes when these presentations are made, the hypotheticals, and you know what I'm talking about, Del, they go to the extreme, kind of even the one that Sean was talking about in San Diego. But I don't think that that's usually the most common. The most common situation is where everybody knows everybody. We don't necessarily worry about the exact words associated in, the policies, part of my policy nerd, duty, obedience kind of thing. And that can kind of seep over into the concerns associated with the duty of loyalty conflict issues. And it's just, you just need to, people get a little tired of me, I know that, but it is a piece of making sure that the organization is cared for, is kind of where I try to come from. And of course, we're all here because we do care. So just stay, whenever you're talking to, the rest of the, if we do this as a training, I would just encourage to bring that piece of it in as well. There is a little bit of a need to be a little, it's not as happy, happy-go-lucky, and I pat your back, you pat mine all the time.
Yeah, can I just add one more thing before we close this out there? Because if you don't know why Doug is he's a policy nerd, it's because he's the chair of our county charter commission. So that will explain a lot of things, right? Okay, he's the chair.
Thank you for doing that. Naomi?
Okay. This is your chance to ask Del whatever. So no more questions?
I've got a question for Del. It's kind of maybe stepping a little bit into the weeds, but does ignorance equate to negligence? So hypothetically, a board member fails to read financial statements, something is happening, and they're not seeing it. Would that equate to negligence?
That's not the right question to ask an attorney, because I'm not going to say that it is negligence, but I will say that it's a red flag when someone doesn't fulfill the duty of care, because that's really what it goes to. Now, we get these financial statements, and we're a board of volunteers. Not all of our volunteers are CPAs. When they get this stuff, we might not necessarily understand what's in that report. So it's basically, are we acting in good faith based on the information we have? You know, if and depending on the circumstances, maybe, and maybe if the something about the financials have been brought to light, maybe we do have a duty to maybe start asking closer questions and getting help from outside the board to help us understand those financials. But short of something like that, I don't think that the law necessarily requires everyone to be a financial analyst and to fully understand these reports, because somebody has buried in there some kind of a inappropriate expense. And I would hate to opine that anything was negligent, because I might have to defend that person.
Okay, thank you, Del. Okay, next up, we have Rich Proctor, who is our district insurance liaison. Rich?
Thank you, Naomi. If I could share my screen, I will do that now. Thank you all. I'll try to get through this rapidly. There's a lot to cover in this particular presentation, and it kind of dovetails into what Del has been talking about, especially when it comes to the directors and officers. So let's begin. We have a program that's being put together by Rotary International. It's a liability insurance program. What is in this program? We're going to go through these items here, and we're going to end up with how we're going to report something that might happen and resources that are available to you and anybody throughout. So in this program, we have two products, basically. We have general liability, and we have directors and officers, which also includes employment practices liability insurance. And who is covered in this program? Okay, we have the club, the district, the Rotaract Club, which would also be the Interact Club, Community Core Certified Youth Exchange Programs, RILA, PETS. All of these entities are covered. Del knows that the host committee for the convention in 2027 will not be covered because it is a separate entity, as it was for 2020. And what are we covering here? We're covering general liability, directors and officers, and employment practices liability, as I mentioned. So who is covered? This is a good question. Who is covered by these policies? Well, it says here, volunteers and Rotarians with respect to their liability for acts within the course and scope of their duties on behalf of the Rotary Club or district. So as long as they're doing what the club has told them to do, or what they think they've been told to do by the club, or acting within the scope of that activity, all of these folks are covered, including non-members, which would be volunteers, maybe family members, or someone else. They're covered. And the common causes of coverage under the general liability, we've got bodily injury and property damage, as we all know. This includes liquor liability, which is an important aspect of the coverage. Abuse and molestation, we'll get to that in a moment, and Peter Evans is going to talk a little bit more about that later when it comes to child care. Non-owned and rented auto liability. Medical payments coverage. Personal and advertising injury, which includes copyright infringement. We'll get into that a little bit better also. So let's start with the basic coverage. This is what general liability is supposed to cover you for. Property damage and bodily injury, which covers claims brought by third parties. Now, this is important. As mentioned above, the volunteers and Rotarians are considered to be insureds. And as such, if a volunteer or Rotarian is injured on a project, they are not covered by the policy because they're insured by the policy. So therefore, they are insureds cannot sue themselves under the policy, which leads us to the necessity of creating or not creating, but implementing waivers of liability. And this is important because the waiver of liability should be on all projects that you're engaged upon that have any kind of physical activity involved. We've had to do this with the park. I know that Peely's doing it very rigorously out there at Gunstock Ranch for the tree planting, and that's actually Gunstock Ranch's requirement. But it also should be one that we require out there in case someone were to get injured. I haven't been aware of any injuries or incidences that have come to bear on this matter, but we need to be cognizant of it. I have the hold on a second. I think I have a copy of a copy of a this is a copy of a release here that you can see that is on the website, and we'll get to that. There's a lot of information that you can glean from the website, which is rotary.ajg.com, and that'll be at the end of the presentation, but there's a lot of stuff that's available there. So what else is covered by this? We have liquor liability. Woohoo! There's a certain amount of comfort that might be gleaned by having some liquor liability, because we do have, when we get together, hopefully at a not too distant future, we will break bread and maybe have a glass of wine or so. And this is important. You can also use this for fundraisers. We've used this, the liquor liability, to get liquor get a liquor license for certain fundraising events that we've benefited by when we were able to get together and drink together. So anyway, this is going to protect the club, and so you can be assured that something happens. Now, what is liquor liability? We should be clear on what that means. Generally speaking, what it means is somebody who has been imbibing too much alcohol gets involved in an accident and injures somebody severely, and they do not have enough insurance. And the lawyer on the other side says, hey, we're going to go after the Rotary Club of Honolulu because they were sponsoring this event. And so therefore they sue the club for injuries done to a third party who was involved in an accident that one of your members or people who attended your function were involved in. That's the basic reason for liquor liability. So this is something you've got to be careful about. Sexual abuse and molestation. Excuse me. As it says here, there's no exclusion on the policy. And so it means that there's no endorsement saying, oh, we're going to cover this, but they're just not, they're going to be silent on the matter. So what does this mean? If a club or the district gets accused of sexual abuse and molestation, whether it be a minor or an adult, the defense costs will be there. In a civil matter, it'll protect actually the person that being accused. In a criminal matter, that's not going to be the case, because none of this covers any kind of criminal behavior, basically. So there will be coverage for that. Just so you know, the deductible on the RI policy, which they are going to have to pick up the tab for, is $250,000. Their general liability has a pretty significant deductible because it's a big policy covering all 50 states and internationally as well. So Peter's going to talk about our best practices for keeping this exposure at a minimum, because, you know, it's true that even though you're covered for this, the last thing in the world you ever want to have is an incident where you're being accused of it, because we all know that just the accusation will have devastating consequences on the club and anybody involved in it. So we don't really want to have any of that happen. Non-owned and hired automobile liability. What this is about is you have someone who's doing an errand for the club, or, you know, let's say you have an executive director and they go out and they get involved in an accident. Well, their policy, the person who is driving the vehicle or owns the vehicle, is going to be primary, and this is going to provide excess. So if there's a serious accident and they say, oh, they were doing something for the Rotary District 5000 or the Rotary Club of Honolulu, whatever, this is going to pick up for that exposure. Okay, so that's another good thing that the policy is. Medical payments, excuse me, I like to call this goodwill insurance. It's a limited sum, I believe it's $10,000, which would be voluntary on your side. Let's say someone slips and falls on your coming to your meeting, or and you know that they don't have the right insurance. So you go to RI and you say, RI, I'd really like you to pay for this medical bill here, because I don't want this person suing us for bigger numbers, and they might do that. I see this very rarely being implemented, honestly. Even in my career, I almost never see it because people are not willing, or they don't understand the nature of it. But it is called goodwill insurance and only covers medical bills. Personal injury and advertising injury. This is sort of an esoteric coverage that is given to all the clubs. And one thing I just have to say about that is it covers copyright infringement, but there's an exclusion that's just been added recently since actually this deck was put together, which really says if you don't own the content of what you're putting out in your advertising material or brochure, whatever it is, do not print or post it without receiving permission from the owner. So be careful on whatever you're saying or putting into your promotional materials, making sure that it's not stepping on anybody's rights.
Rick, I'm sorry. Can I just ask a quick question
Sure.
about what you just said? You said if it's not owned, but what about
You just muted yourself, Doug.
what about those items that are in the public domain that nobody owns?
If they are in the public domain, you can use them. My thinking is what they're talking about primarily is utilizing other people's music. Number one, if it's a published article, as long as you reference the name of the origin of it, I think you might be okay with that. And of course, it has to be something that's going to create ire or some sort of discontent. If it's informational, generally speaking, it's going to be okay. But if you're using something to raise funds, let's say, that could be another issue altogether. That's I think where you might want to draw the line. I don't know, Del, if you have any other comment around that, you might opine on it. But basically, you've got to be careful on what you publish and what you use for promotional purposes. D&O insurance. Del told us why we need what we need to do to avoid getting in trouble around it. We have to have care, loyalty, and obedience. So what if we don't do those things? In a corporate world, I like to call this insurance bonehead decision-making insurance because basically if the directors are just doing something stupid, like as you said, employing a contractor who's a member who isn't qualified to do the work that you need them to do, and they fail on the project, and the club has a bill to pay that they're not prepared for and no result of that. Well, that's a bonehead decision. You shouldn't have done that, and you should have been transparent about it. You could get sued for damages, and you have coverage for that. As long as you were acting in, you weren't acting fraudulently, or you weren't acting, illegally, this coverage is going to provide for the clubs, district directors, officers, results of their activities. And included in that policy is the D&O, the EPLI, or Employment Practices Liability Insurance. This is a coverage to protect you against employee action. Okay, so I'd like to call that wrongful termination, sexual harassment, and discrimination. And discrimination is a word that flows between both sides of this, because the D&O policy will protect you from discriminating against third parties, and also to discriminating against members if that's what's being alleged. And same is true of EPL, because if the employee is being terminated because she can't do the job, or he can't do the job anymore, he's too old, well, guess what? There's a lawsuit waiting to happen on that one. And also, if there's a romantic relationship between your executive director and a board member, or God forbid, the president, oh my Lord, are you in trouble there? So that should not be something that, that's just fraught with peril. So keeping your hands off the executive director, no matter who he or she is a very good idea. And also playing above the board and being very transparent in activities. And this is a very literally thorny issue that has to be navigated very delicately at a board level, because transparency may not be the way to do it, because by being fully transparent, you might besmirch somebody's reputation. And that could be a problem too. So this is a very difficult one. And I would caution and also ask that the board in this matter get legal advice whenever there's a particular issue having to do with an executive director or anybody under the employ of the organization. So who are we covering here under the DNO and EPL? We're all of these folks: director, trustees, officers, Rotarians, committee members, employees. They're all there covered. So that's a good thing. You should also know that we don't have any property insurance coverage here. So if your president or your treasurer takes off with the money, I'm sorry, you've got to figure out that on your own. These are club decisions to be made because you're not covered for it under this program. There is the coverage territory. We don't really need to worry about that. It's worldwide, but the suit has to be brought in the United States, or in this case, and in the DNO wherever legal and be permissible. And here's some of the exclusions. We'll go through this: communicable disease, aircraft, property, childcare, and some limitations. Communicable disease, this is a new one. And it's on every liability and policy that I write. And it's brand new because of COVID. So it's really incumbent upon the clubs to do what they have to do to keep people safe, which is also going to delay, I think, our getting together, because it's a little cumbersome. So please do what you can, because this is across the board. Insurance companies do not want to take on this risk. Aircraft, well, this isn't a really big deal except for drones. You'll see it in this. Of course, we don't own spacecrafts or satellites, hot air balloons. Oh my God! But drones, sometimes you might want to put a drone up on an event and film it. So anything having to do with drone activities is not covered by this policy. And if you're going to launch any missiles, I don't want to know about it. Property exclusion, as I mentioned, we're not covering your office contents, stuff you might have in storage. I think if your club has a fair amount of T-shirts or whatever you might be keeping in a particular location, you're going to have to find a policy for that on your own. Okay. Elder care and child care, this is if you're doing that sort of thing. I think if you're supporting it by financial aid or what have you, I don't think you have to worry about that. But if you're owning it or managing it, I think in a limited fashion, if you're babysitting some children for a particular function that you might have, I don't believe that that's going to be a problem. But again, we're going to get into the abuse and molestation, which is something that Peter's going to talk about. Oh, yes. We have a lot of events that draw more than 25,000 people. I know we got to all worry about this exclusion. And then construction projects over 50,000. And we do have to worry about that. At least the Rotary Club of Honolulu's had to worry about that. And we took out a policy specifically for the construction of the first phase of Centennial Park, which was way more than 50,000. And so we were covering both ourselves and the district for anything that might happen outside of the liability that the contractor incurred. So if you're doing anything more than $50,000, you have to buy a policy for that. And fireworks displays, I don't think any of us have to worry about that. We're not doing any of that. So if you have a report or something, you can do all of this online. There's a report that you should fill out and notify RI as soon as you can. If you don't have to have a claim necessarily. I would encourage you, if there's an injury or something that you're concerned about, or property damage you're concerned about, fill out the report anyway. Get it to them, so we don't wait for the claim to happen or the lawsuit to fall on you, because then that's a little bit too late for some investigating, and we really need to get ahead of the curve on that. So please go on the website and find that. So here we go. Where can you find more resources? The insurance program is being brokered through a sizable insurance company or insurance agency, Gallagher. And here are all the information. The only thing you really need to know is the website, which is it's not really indicated here. It's, well, you can email rotary@ajg.com, or you can call them and they can give. But it's all basically on the RI website, and it's all very available to you. And all you'd have to do is log in at, here we go, rotary.ajg.com, and use your regular Rotary password. Certificates of insurance, I'll touch on that because I can do them for you, but you can probably do them for yourself if you need to. We haven't had a whole lot of insurance certificates that are needed, but there are times when you're going to have an event someplace and you need to name one of the providers or the host location as additional insured. So you can put this together. The certificate of insurance can be very readily available to you, naming them as additional insured, and it can be done through this website, or you can reach out to me and I will do it for you. That's not a problem. I got to say, Naomi, I haven't had to do many this year, which is really sort of sad. It is really sort of sad. Anyway, are there any questions?
Yeah, I did have one quick question, Rich. In the D&O, and you identified everybody that would be covered, the employee definition, does that include 1099 contractors?
Are you thinking about on the employment practices side?
Whatever when you were listing the folks that were covered.
No,
right?
it would not be. It would not be 1099 contractors they would not be considered part of that D&O. That's a very good question, Doug, relative to, let's say, an executive director. My belief is that 1099, and I could do more research on this. My belief is that the 1099 would be covered if they were to proceed against you on an employment practices liability claim. But that's a very good question. And sometimes some companies, some instances don't, but the Rotary program is very broad. It's a really good program. Anybody else? I think I'm done.
Actually, Rich, I do have a question.
Okay, Dave.
First little statement, insurance, of course, mitigates the financial risk. It doesn't keep the risk from being there. What do you see as the most common risks that Rotarians, clubs have? And what do you think is the greatest risk? And then finally, as Rotarians, if we observe something that we think there's a risk, what should we do?
Those are tough questions. I think the most common risk that we have, especially when we're going out and doing our projects, is someone gets injured on site. That can happen. We've had it happen. I'm sure every club has experienced some sort of cut or bruise, and God forbid, a broken leg or something of that nature. And usually it's by the person who is a volunteer. But I can see, and I was thinking about this question, the worst thing I could see, and again, it's project related. For example, if we were doing some landscaping in a particular place and we didn't know that there was an underground cable, and not only did somebody who was digging to put a plant in hit the cable and seriously injure themselves, but also knock out power to a commercial or establishment, that could be a really devastating claim that I could foresee. You're going to have the normal slip and fall at particular lunches and people who are, that's a common thing that you might see. And if you see that there's, if you see that the food is not being presented right, or there's water on the floor in the restaurant that you're attending, you want to get up and say something to whomever you are, whomever you're with, and if you see somebody doing something like you've got somebody of a family member who's going off the reservation to work on somebody else's yard when you want them to be over here, you got to go and grab them and bring them back and say, no, we're not doing that. We're doing this, and those are the kind of things that I think that you want to be careful about. Just be good parents, basically. Just be, really, that's the way I see it. Thanks.
And Dick May had a question about if the club has an event at a restaurant and everybody buys their own alcohol, what is the responsibility for Rotary if something happens?
That's normally what happens, and it mitigates the exposure. And one of the things that I had up there, and I couldn't get to it because of the screen situation, was a best practices document that is also on that website that you can go to, and it lists all the best ways of mitigating the liquor liability exposure. And one of them is to do just that, Dick. Have everybody, it doesn't keep the lawsuit from happening. I mean, if somebody gets seriously injured, the lawsuit could happen, but it'll help on the other side when Rotary has to defend.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rich. Really
Great
informative. Okay, Peter. Peter is our Youth Protection Officer.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Last but not least, right, youth protection. So very important when we're talking about fiduciary responsibility. Again, I'm Peter Evans. I'm your youth protection officer for our district. I work currently for the U.S. Marine Corps as a risk manager out there. So you can see how I fit into my role here as the Youth Protection Officer, or YPO. So I wanted to speak to you today about our fiduciary responsibility in protecting our youth. So it's a little bit different from having to, having to go through a full-fledged youth protection type training. Benson and a few others here have experienced that. And if I did do a training event for just youth protection, that would take the entire 1.5 hours for sure. But what we want to talk about is our fiduciary responsibility. You know, I was told as a risk manager that I'm sort of like a doomsday prepper, you know, always raining on people's good intentions, you know, but, you know, we see it all the time in media, youth organizations destroyed because of bad decisions, right? People on trial, Del, you probably seen this in your time for something they've, people on trial for doing stuff bad, you know, dealing with children. You know, there are many stories out there. But one thing that we need to think about when we're talking or discussing our fiduciary responsibilities as in terms of youth protection is really the only thing that you need to know is that we are responsible. Del, this kind of ties into a lot of things that Del mentioned earlier, you know, trust, confidence, reliance. You know, those are the three things that you have to take a look at. You know, fiduciary responsibilities really deal with care, loyalty, and obedience, right? I sound very textbook when I say that. A lot of broad statements. But when we think of all the great work that we do, we have to be real conscious of all that occurs within our clubs and dealing with when dealing with youth. So our fiduciary responsibility for youth protection starts when we create that relationship between the youth that we serve and our clubs. When we plan an event such as beach cleanup, when we invite our youth to those, or when we participate in an interact meeting or event, our fiduciary responsibilities follow us. So I want to share you just real quick on this, on our screen. Here we go. Everyone sees that? Okay, so on the screen, I have basically just one slide that posts our statement of conduct when working with youth. It's very important when I mention this slide right here and what it says. This is our core, and it must be in the forefront in all we do when we're dealing with youth. So Rotary International strives to create and maintain a safe environment for all youth who participate in Rotary activities. To the best of their ability, Rotarians, Rotarian spouses and partners, and other volunteers must safeguard the children and young people with who they come into contact and protect them from physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. So when we take a look at this statement right here, it talks about Rotarians, Rotarian spouses, partners, and other volunteers must safeguard. That's a non-negotiable. I'm going to leave this slide up there, but it is a non-negotiable. It's something that we as a organization, we're responsible in conducting. We're responsible in ensuring safe environment to everyone that we deal with. You as leaders, right, have the ability. You have to be able to convey the importance of protecting our youth and stress risk management in all we do, and that's really important for us as leaders. We can certainly delegate. But we need to know who's in place. We need to know who we have in place, what they're doing at all times. I'm not telling you that we need to micromanage, but we just need to know, the people that we have and what they're doing. We as leaders are the example, and many, if not all of our members observe what we do. We're the example, and we lead by example. If it's important to us, it'll definitely be important to our members and our volunteers. So what is our fiduciary responsibility for protecting youth? I threw out, and Dell threw out a bunch of terms, right? Trust, confidence, reliance, I'm saying it again. And then care, loyalty, and obedience, right? Fiduciary responsibility is our legal obligation of the highest degree to act in the best interest of our club, its members, and the people that we serve. We do this by knowing who we are allowing to work with youth. I said that earlier, but we vet our members and volunteers, or member volunteers, through interview and reference checks. We also have to make sure that we're conducting criminal background checks. Any member who comes in contact with minors, whether it's unsupervised contact, supervised contact, should have a criminal background check conducted. Our district has been very good. Our clubs have been very good at submitting those. We also have to ensure that our people are properly trained to react in such events as emergencies, accusations, assaults. This is something that Dell talked about a little bit earlier during his presentation. Training is paramount when it comes down to people understanding what to do whenever something does happen. In order for training to be effective, it needs to be specific, it needs to be frequent, and applicable to the program and volunteers' role. So if you have somebody that's dealing with maybe just a beach cleanup, that type of training may be different from someone who is dealing with like an interact club throughout the year. And one big thing here, folks, is disclosure. We talked disclosure earlier, in earlier presentations, but reporting requirements and notification all tie into these responsibilities. Disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. Disclose what you're disclosing, and even more so. Reporting, understanding who to report to, and not delaying any of the reporting. It helps with investigation. It helps with getting the correct information right away, and it protects the integrity of the information that we're gathering. Oh, I'm sorry, I just covered us. So each Rotary district is responsible for ensuring that all clubs comply with Rotary policies and local laws. And this comes straight from our youth protection guide. Non-compliance can have serious consequences, including termination of individual memberships or club's charter, or the suspension of the entire district's program. Highly unlikely that anything like that will happen, but who knows? Something as serious, from an allegation could certainly lead towards that. Our youth protection guide is an excellent resource that speaks exactly how we conduct our business. We talked earlier about the four-way test. Four-way test is an excellent method of assessing what our responsibilities are. We can certainly use that. Let me see if I can share something else with you. Stop share. Oh, here we go. This is our youth protection guide, folks. If you have any questions, this is an excellent guide. And I talked to you earlier about this is what we use to conduct our business, but the youth protection guide is on our district website, and it really gives you an idea of some of the procedures, responsibilities, awareness, what to look for when dealing with children, you know, and it's an excellent guide. I use it all the time. I have it saved here in everything, my phone and on my desktop, and it's an excellent guide for me to refer on. Let's put that back on there. But I appreciate your commitment, you know, in making sure that our youth is protected. I know that we've got a lot of good things that we want to do, and I don't want to discourage any of you from doing those good things. We should definitely go for it, but we want to make sure that we know what we're doing, and we know that we have a duty to protect our youth, our members, as well as our reputation. That's very important. As the Youth Protection Officer, the YPO, I'm here to support all of you. So please reach out to me if you need any assistance at all, whether or not it's training, whether or not it's some guidance. I'm always here. You can reach me at ypo@rotaryd5000.org. I will send out my phone number if not all of you have it already. And I'm here for you. So anything that you folks need, just let me know. I know Rich talked about abuse and molestation. That is a training all in itself to see the signs of abuse and molestation, and to, you know, if you have any suspicion of anything, it's better to side on, you know, being able to, I guess, notify people, disclose, and ask questions. And that's definitely something that we don't want to shy away from. But we do offer specific training for that. So please, I would say, take advantage of all of that. And that will help us be a lot better, safer, robust program. So if anyone has any questions.
Peter, there were some questions in the chat. So one is when you talk about youth, you're talking about 18 and under, right? Or
Correct.
under 18.
Yeah, so under 18, I know we deal with Rotaract, which is college age, but we're talking specifically minors. Tex, that's a great question, and I'm glad to clarify that. So any minor under the age of 18.
Okay, so Rotaractors are over 18. So for James Ham has a question about Rotaract clubs. They also need to go follow these safeguards.
Absolutely. You know, we do have, it still falls under the Youth Protection Guide. The Youth Protection Guide really specifically talks about 18 and under. We still want to be mindful that we do have a responsibility for these groups. These groups are students. We still have a fiduciary, a responsibility, a duty to ensure that they're protected. A lot of that really comes down to when we do our risk assessments, when we have our meetings, when we have our outings. Usually on the Rotaract side, they'll do community events. As long as we're doing the proper risk assessments and taking a look at how well we can protect them and our organization, that would be very proper.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And I got a few slides about our governance documents. And after 10:30, if you still would like to ask some questions of Peter or Rich, you can stay on to the call. But let me share my screen. So the governance documents that we have, and I'll go real quick. So we have the manual of procedure that's 400 pages. We have the Constitution, bylaws, and we've got a district policy manual. The district policy manual is on the district website on the first tab on the navigation bar. But these are the documents that talk about our policies and procedures. And the constitutional documents are amended through the council of Legislation, COL. So you'll hear about COL a little bit more. So the manual covers the structure, policies, the mission. It has information about all of the meetings and the legal documents. The district policy manual talks about organization, the finances, the officers, standing committees, youth protection policies, and these are submitted through the district resolution and legislation committee 60 days before the district conference, because it's at the district conference that we vote on any amendments. And we will have quite a few amendments at the upcoming district conference. Okay, so for club documents, you have the standard constitution and bylaws, and every once in a while they are updated. So clubs should be looking at the recommended documents, and you can find this on the RI website. But any changes or customization of the bylaws, as long as it's within the code of policies, okay. But if you have any doubts, call the CDS. Okay, we have the councils. There's a Council of Resolution and Legislation. Resolution is looking at all of the urgent enactments, and they meet every year. Council on Legislation, COL, is the legislative body, and it's every 3 years, and that's where they changed the rules. So our representative right now is Wynn Shanaman, and the representative is elected at selected at the nomination committee meeting, which happens in November when we choose DG. But this is a 3-year term, and right now the current term is July 2020 to 23. So in 2022 we'll be electing a new COL, and it's through the clubs that this election comes through. Okay, so to propose a legislation resolution, it comes through the club, so the club has to agree. Then you send it to our district committee, and then we vote on it at the district conference. Okay, so the COL duties is they let us know about the resolutions, and they help clubs with any changes that they have, and they will let us know what's going on with the Council on Legislation. So the governance structure is the RI board with the TRF board, and then the general secretary. We covered that before, but risk management is part of what we look at on the policy manuals and in the things that we've learned today. So I understand some of you had some problems getting into Learning Center about risk management. So just take away from this that what the whole message was, to ask yourself what can go wrong and think about the risks there. Okay, so we're at 10:30. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for all of our presenters, Jim and Nick. Thank you so much for your support. I hope everyone you got some takeaways from this. So thank you everybody.
Do you mind if I take a quick picture of everybody?
Okay. Okay, everybody, smile for Wendy.
Let me just close this out. Okay, ready? Smile. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Okay. So stay on if you have any questions for our presenters. But Wendy, what's coming up next?
Yeah, so just first of all, this is session number 5 of 7. So hopefully you're all enjoying yourselves tremendously, but we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. This is 5 of 7 sessions, so we just have a couple of left. So just an FYI, we will be reaching out to you with a survey to ask you for your thoughts on what went really, really great in this academy and what we could make even better. Because we want this, this was, as you know, we brought this Leadership Academy back under Naomi's vision, but we want this to be a sustained academy and we want it to grow. So you are going to be a really, really big part of making that happen. So that's going to be coming up soon. Some reminders, you know all of this already. Just as a reminder, reach out to your mentors, finish your assignments, and if you haven't yet made your payment, I'll be reaching out to you if we haven't received it, but please make your payment. We will have a graduation at district conference in May, and just a reminder, as a requirement to graduate will be that all your assignments are completed and that your dues are paid. So if you're back on your assignments, I'm just this is your time to go and catch up on those assignments. So that's all I have. But again, thank you for joining us today. It was so much wonderful information. I think we'll try to get some of that those PowerPoints up on our website so that you can have access to it. But thank you everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and Jim, for coming from the mainland. So great, appreciate it.
Good job.
Yeah.
You're